Welcome to this YouTube version of our results panel from this week's Highland League Weekly. This panel's taken from the main episode of Highland League Weekly. It's available over on the Press and Journal website for subscribers only. This Monday's main show has highlights of two R Davidson Banchory Highland League Cup quarter-finals. If you'd like to see them, you can subscribe now for the low price of just £1 for your first 3 months via our sports pack, but that's over on the website. Here we'll just be discussing what happened in the games that took place amid Storm Dara at the weekend. The weather was pretty bad, there was a bit of disruption, but we did, over the course of the weekend, have 3 Highland League Cup quarter-finals played. We filmed the 2 that took place on Saturday, and our main game was Huntly 3, Deveronvale 3, a game that went to penalties with Deveronvale prevailing 3-1. Callum, it was a game at one point with Deveronvale 3-0 up that looked like they were going to win at a canter, but it didn't prove to be that way, does it?
I think I put in my match report that they effectively had to win that game twice, or that tie twice, because for 60, 70 minutes they were really good. They were very comfortable overall, you'd have to I thought first half especially, their sort of midfield 3 of Keane Matheson, Dem Eunice and Jamie McClellan just sort of snuffed Huntly out. They controlled the game, dominated the game. They sort of seemed, as a collective, the Vale sort of played at an intensity that the Black and Golds sort of struggled to deal with. And it looked, as you said, it looked like they were probably going to win at a bit of a canter. And then after the third goal, Colin Charlesworth made a quadruple substitution, which you don't see too often. Ryan Sewell, Brodie Allen, Finn Allen, Owen Morris all came on, and there was no doubt in my mind that sort of changed the flow of the game. Ryan Sewell, especially both with his dead ball deliveries and also in open play with his energy, seemed to really sort of change the flow of the game. And as comfortable as Deveronvale had been, you'd probably have to say if the tie had then gone on another 5 minutes, Huntly would have won it. I mean, they did obviously the late goals that they've scored, but they'd enough chances. I mean, Ethan Hopkinson saved for Angus Grant, Brodie Allen hits the crossbar with a header, then there's that one at the back post that I think if Ross Still shouts, Angus Grant leaves it, and Ross Still's almost guaranteed to score. And then even at 3-3, free kick tipped over, one corner it hits the crossbar right at the end. It was the sort of turnaround was incredible, really, in such a short space of time, and sort of the way, I suppose, the emotions for both teams just flipped so dramatically. But where I would give, I mean, that's for Huntly, we've spoken about it before, but that sort of never say die spirit came to the fore again, because they looked dead and buried at 3-0 really. But where I would give Deveronvale huge credit is when it came to the penalties, they didn't let what had just happened affect them. Okay, Callum Brodie made a couple of good saves, but the boy Harry Noble and Dem Eunice and Murray Essen took 3 really good penalties for Vale to send them through. And obviously Ethan Hopkinson, who I would imagine won't want to see the second goal probably again, because he hasn't been able to keep it out. He made 2 excellent saves in the shootout as well, and that's where I think Colin Charlesworth said it as well. Going into the penalties, it felt like all the momentum was with Huntly, but Deveronvale did a really good job in that shootout to get themselves through. And you know, it's first time since 2008 they've been in the semi-final of this League Cup. They haven't reached the final of the R Davidson Banchory Highland League Cup since 2005, but you know, they can sort of dare to dream now, I would say.
The shootout was ridiculous though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, after the first 6 spot kicks, it's 1-0. It was it was terrific, great viewing. But I couldn't believe what I was watching, trying to figure out what's going on here for recording the voiceover of it. But yeah, I think Deveronvale are worth it over the course of the 90.
Oh, over
minutes.
the 90 there's no question, aye.
But yeah, Huntly will be kicking themselves for getting themselves into that position in the first place, being at home, a place in the semi-final at stake, and they just weren't at it for the first hour at all. But yeah, bizarrely they could have won it in the 90 as well with that dramatic finish.
Well, it's like Colin Charlesworth was saying, and he was like unhappy maybe about there was only 4 minutes injury time added on with the way they were pushing. But it's like, as he did also say, it's like when they weren't at it for an hour, you can't really moan about 2 or 3 minutes at the end, can you? If they'd played like they did in the closing stages from the outset, it might have been a different game. But I mean, Deveronvale, overall, I would agree with you that they deserved it. And I mean, it keeps this sort of good season that they're having, this good run going. I ken they were a wee bit disappointed they lost to Turriff in the quarter-final of the Morrison Motors Turriff Aberdeenshire Shield last Tuesday, and that, you know, they were sort of looking at this week 2 chances to get into a semi-final, and as much as would have loved to have won both games, at least to have got themselves into that, into one of them in the semi-finals of this the Highland League Cup, scheduled for I think the 1st of March. So it sort of keeps your season bubbling away and gives, I suppose, keeps players motivated and gives them something to look forward to. So it's all good. We do also have to, I think, apologise to Gary Wood, because the post-match interview, I'm going to abdicate blame here, because the cameraman set up where he set up, and it's literally as soon as we started, as you saw, hailstones, rain, the lot came on, so both me and Gary got drenched. But then for the second interview, sensibly set up in the dugout. But sorry again.
Highland League Weekly brawlies, get them
It
sorted.
was how much water collected on his eyebrows. It was quite remarkable.
The other thing quickly as well, aside from joking about that, about conditions, for the amount of rain there was before and during the sort of game, the pitch held up very well at Christie Park, and also sensible sort of approach to it all round in the end, and that the wind was forecast to sort of be 40-50 mile an hour at kick-off, but it didn't actually arrive until 5:30, 6 o'clock, and there was very little wind, so it was good actually. I know sometimes we say about, and I'll say as much as anyone about early call-offs and this and that, but the way both clubs and the referee Owen Lawrence handled that game was very good in terms of getting it played, I would have said.
Yeah. And now in relative terms, when we move on to our second highlights game, which was also a Highland League Cup quarter-final between Brora Rangers and Formartine United, you will see that the weather there was, we'll say, absolutely appalling. Okay then, despite the conditions, I thought a reasonably entertaining highlights package, that one. Apologies, our cameraman had to be that low, but I think if he'd been any higher, he might have been blown away.
If he'd been in the usual tower, which you see above the enclosure,
He wouldn't be with us now.
who knows where he might end
Norway.
up.
If you get through on a day like that, I mean, that's all you can ask for, isn't it?
I think, well, it's the reason why I mentioned the wind with the previous game, because in comparison between Christie Park and Dudgeon Park, between 3 and 5 o'clock on Saturday was stark. The wind had certainly arrived in Brora, and I mean, credit to both sides for what they put into the game in difficult conditions. When you do watch that, you maybe question, should it have been played? I mean, I do think particularly with the penalties, it's
Farcical.
It's quite difficult.
It is.
It's quite difficult when you know, I mean, Andrew McLeod's one, fair play to him for scoring, but the amount of times he had to re-spot it, and I think the ball's probably moving when Tony Dingwall took his and all that. But I mean, it's one of them, I think, as well. For Martin, we're there, we're keen to give it a go. Brora, we're obviously keen to give it a go and get the game played, and the referee Robert McKinnon's gone for it, and they've seen it through. And you know, it's not for me to say whether it's right or wrong, but I mean, it's the conditions very challenging, and both teams, you know, did their best, and fair play to them. And it was a shame, I do think, for the penalties, because it's not conducive to good penalty taking if the ball's nae sort of biding on the spot. But I mean, credit to Brora, they never know when they're beaten, and they came up with something. And I mean, the goal's been credited to Max Ewan, but it's nae the easiest to give it to. I've watched it a few times, but I think for Martin must be sick of the sight of Brora and Dudgeon Park. They've been up 3 times this season in 3 different competitions, and yet to win, and they were so close. I mean, Robert Ward's free kick was an excellent goal, and they were just a few minutes away, and then obviously that almighty Stramash levels it up, so they'd been sick about that. But again, credit to Brora, and credit to Danny Gillan as well, making 3 saves in the shootout. Very impressive, particularly when he hasn't played much this season. Cammy Mackay's the number 1, but he was unavailable on Saturday. But Danny Gillan came in and certainly sort of pressed his case for more game time, because 3 excellent saves.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't seem overly keen to stay out in the pitch too long celebrating, did he?
I haven't seen a winning team head for the stand as quick in a game in my life. It was like, right, that's it, move on, out of here in the shower.
Get inside, yeah. Feel for the kit man and stuff after a weekend like that. There was one other Highland League Cup quarter-final that was played. It was played on Friday, fortunately, so I think the worst of the weather was potentially avoided. You were there.
Well, it still wasn't it? The wind wasn't quite as bad as it became on Saturday, but there was driving rain through it. So it still, put it this way, it wasn't a really short sleeves and sunglasses weather. Okay. But
Banchory 3 though, Brechin City 0. Great result for D, that one. Maybe uncharacteristic from Brechin?
First of all, it's the first time Banchory have beaten Brechin at the 6th attempt, so a big result for them, not just getting into the semi-final of the competition, but also to sort of get that monkey off their back, and it keeps Banchory going in another competition. We've seen them win the Evening Express Aberdeenshire Cup already, and they'll fancy their chances, I'm sure, of trying to go all the way in the R Davidson Banchory Highland League Cup as well. Brechin, I think, and I'm not knocking the guys that played, but their selection
reflected their priorities.
Reflected how high up the sort of agenda the Highland League Cup is for them, because you had the likes of Lenny Wilson, Fraser McLeod, Brad Mackay, Kev McHarty, Ewan Loudon, Seth Patrick, all guys who, Spencer Moreland as well, all guys who you're used to seeing start. They were all on the bench, and it kind of seemed like they were using it as an opportunity to maybe give people game time and sort of look at one or two different things, whereas I think if it had been a league game against Banchory, the team would have been different. But the league, that's their prerogative. The league's their main focus, clearly, in this sort of race to try and get back up. But I give credit to Banchory. I thought second half they were playing into the wind, and I thought Brechin would have more pressure than they actually did, but they sort of nullified their threat, particularly second half, really well. And I thought throughout the 90 minutes, Max Alexander and Michael Phillipson in particular posed a constant threat. They were both heavily involved in the sort of all the good things that Banchory did. They both scored as well, and they were sort of, I would say for me, on the night standouts, and it was a very good victory for Banchory at the end of it.
It's a good quarter-final, semi-final lineup. Sorry, we've still got Bucky Thistle against Fraserburgh to be played. Do we know when that's going to be played at this stage?
I don't have a definitive answer, but I think the expectation is probably towards the end of January or start of February, that sort of time.
Okay. Bit of a wait. Right, there were league games scheduled for the weekend as well, but the weather's the same for the league as it is for the League Cup. One did go ahead, the microclimate of Inverness, ensuring that Clatnacuddin could play Lossiemouth, and it was a big win for Clark, 5-1.
It was a very good win for Clark after 3 losses. They'll be delighted with that. I think, given Conor Gethin's comments in recent weeks, to see his side converting some of the chances they created on Saturday will be a big plus for him. And I mean, within that, James Anderson, 2 goals, that takes him up to 50 for the Lily Whites, which is a very impressive achievement, and probably would have been there a while ago if he hadn't had a year out with injury. But he's somebody, I mean, the first goal especially was a really good finish on Saturday, and it's a good milestone to hit. But I think he'll have his sights set on plenty more, I would imagine. And overall, Clark, they're still sitting in that sort of top part of the table and having a very good league campaign. I think for Lossie, very disappointing the way it panned out. Like at 2-0 down, they scored, got themselves back in the game, and then sort of shot themselves in the foot a wee bit by conceding so quickly. And I think the manner of a couple of the goals, the 5th one, they're sort of caught on the counter a wee bit, but the 2nd and 4th, particularly both of Jack Mackay's goals, I thought they were avoidable from a Lossiemouth perspective, and they're sort of looking, I feel like at the moment they're needing a result from somewhere just to try and sort of
stem the flow.
Spark things again. And it's, I think folk are getting a bit sort of excited about this or worked up about how tight it is at the bottom of the table, but I think for Lossy it's important can cool heads, because they have got enough there to get themselves away from the sort of bottom end, but I think they need one result to start with just to turn things around. It's worth saying as well that the postponements, Wick Turriff was an early postponement, but Strathspey Keith sounded a wee bit controversial in that it passed an inspection at 8:30, but then I think it was a 2 o'clock kick-off, and when Keith were just arriving in Granton, the game then went off, so I assume conditions had perhaps worsened, and when the match referee turned up he decided it was a no-go due to waterlogging. But I mean, frustrating for all involved, but particularly for Keith when you've had to pay for a bus and you were almost there and everything like that. But one of those things that can happen sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, well, not much change to the Breedon Highland League standings, but let's have a look at them anyway. Okay, then that's it. All of the weekend's curtailed Highland League and associated competitions card discussed. Just a reminder, if you'd like to watch this week's main Highland League Weekly episode with highlights of 2 R Davidson Banchory Highland League Cup quarter-final ties, you can do that over on the Press and Journal website now, but you need to be a subscriber. So the good news for you is you can sign up at the moment for the low price of £1 for your first 3 months via our sports pack. But next Monday we'll be back here as well, just talking about the results from this weekend's Highland League action, if you'd prefer to keep reviewing that way. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with everything Highland League and Highland League Weekly from the Press and Journal via 2 avenues. You can follow us on our various social media channels. You can also sign up for our Highland League newsletter via the link below. But until we see you next, please stay dry and enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching.